How do you go from a mobile oil change business to leading one of Michigan's top roofing companies? Ryan Spencer's entrepreneurial journey has taken him from parking lots to rooftops, with a few storm-chasing adventures along the way. In this episode, we'll explore Ryan's unconventional path into roofing and how knocking doors in Columbus kickstarted his career. From humble beginnings, Ryan has built a thriving business while staying true to his roots in customer service. As the owner of Sharp Roofing, Ryan's focus on relationships and integrity set him apart. His background in community outreach shaped his approach to sales, making him one of the most relatable leaders in the industry. You'll learn about perseverance, door-knocking strategies, and scaling a business from the ground up. Let's jump into the conversation with Ryan Spencer from Sharp Roofing. Welcome to the Roofing Success Podcast. I'm Jim Aline, and I'm here to bring you insights from top leaders in the roofing industry to help you grow and scale your roofing business. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Hit those buttons, like, share, leave us a comment, leave us a review. And man, my phone number's in the description. So, I've gotten a couple of good text messages lately about some, people that have been listening to the show and things that they've been implementing in their business. And it's super cool to hear that. So, feel free to reach out. Today we got Ryan Spencer with Sharp Roofing, Sharp Construction, Sharp Contracting. What are you guys these days?
We've actually been through like rebranding. So we're trying to figure that out as we go.
Yeah. I like Sharp Roofing. I like that one.
Yeah, we've stuck with that for the last year, so it's been good. So,
nice.
Yeah,
so the great state of Michigan.
Great state of Michigan, particularly the West. So yeah.
How did you get into roofing, Ryan?
So back in 2007, I'll go right prior to my roofing career. I started a mobile oil change business, and we traveled around with oil change equipment in the back of a trailer and started, changing people's oil in parking lots and while they're at work and fleets and things of that nature. And I probably didn't have any business doing that, but we did that for a couple of years. It had my business partner had kind of stepped out of the scene abruptly, and so I was kind of left at 21, 22 years old holding the bag, and so. We knew we needed to make a shift. Really didn't have any plans of shifting into roofing, but my dad gets a call from a friend of ours that had just jumped into storm restoration work, and he said, "Hey, I think your boys would be good at this." And so we drove down from Michigan to Houston and did. I always use quotation fingers training for about a week. And then we ended up in Columbus, Ohio in 2009 to kind of kickstart our career in roofing. So a lot of door knocking. Yep.
Yeah. So the training was, hey, go knock on that door.
Yeah. We drove around and he's pointing to roofs, yelling out, "That's a GAF roof. That's a CertainTeed roof. That's an Owens Corning roof." I'm in the back of the truck thinking, I've never even heard these words or letters before. So yeah, it was, and then he'd pull up in front of a house that he knew apparently needed a roof, and he'd say, "Get out and go knock that door." So that was the extent of my training.
Trial by fire, right? Like just get out there and do it.
You got it.
And so you got into the storm chasing, right? You started chasing storms. So how was that path?
So growing up, and my pastor has been for 30 years almost. And then I grew up going to church, and we would go out and do different, community impact days and knock on doors and meet people, invite them to church, invite them to special events. So that I didn't realize that my whole life I had been training to be a storm restoration, door knocking, roofing contractor. So that was one thing that actually I was super comfortable with, was that part to it, which I know a lot of guys come into it, and that's the most uncomfortable part. So for me, it was learning shingles and, where they go on the roof, and, not having ever been in construction before. That was just like ground zero, absolute idiot in roofing. So yeah, it started with nothing.
Isn't there, do you feel now, looking back, that there's something to ignorance Like to me, like when you're starting out in a career or a field, there's something to like not knowing a lot where you just keep pushing forward, and sometimes when you know too much you hold yourself back. Have you ever ran into that in your life?
So my first year, so I started in March, went to November, came home. We had our first child, kind of got reacclimated to life with a baby. And then we took off. I took my family with me to New York. So we went from Columbus and Cincinnati to New York was our next stop. And went for whatever reason, when I came into that next season, which was like April 5th or 6th of 2010, it was like the light switch went on. I didn't know any other trades. I didn't know. I knew we sold one brand. We had 8 colors, and if they asked me about gutters, I froze and wanted to cry because I didn't know anything about gutters or siding or anything like that. So there was a focus, I think, where I knew what my job was. I didn't know anything but that job, and I could just go out and just pound that one thing, over
Yeah,
and over and over again. So yeah, I would say that that created some focus for me. So probably
nice.
left some money on the table, but I can have
Yeah,
money
probably,
for it.
but
Yeah.
it's just it's funny to me. Like if you just kind of like you just there's it's like the innocence of a child, right? Children just go, like they just do things, right? And I think sometimes we lose that in life, and I think that again, I've had a talk, I talked to a lot of contractors, and sometimes I like Juan Reyes I've had on the podcast. He printed up a couple hundred business cards and just went door to door. He didn't even have a crew to install the roofs that he was selling. Like he didn't even know how to bid a roof. Like sometimes I think that aspect of a person helps that momentum, right? It builds that momentum, and then the scars come from all the no's and all the
Yeah.
and then we start to overthink things. I don't know, just thoughts that I had. So now you're traveling with a newborn, and the wife. You're going around chasing storms still. Where does the story go from there?
So we left Michigan, like I said, like first or second week in April of 2010. I took. We basically had spent that November to April spending all the money we had made, which was very little. Um, so we left for New York. We landed in New York. I had $100 to my name. Lived in the upstairs of a church for free. Thankfully, they were kind enough to let me live there, and it was basically like a glorified attic. Um, had to get a job. Went out and knocked. Got a job within a couple days, and it was the fastest insurance, from start to finish, paid and closed, I still have ever had, and made a little bit of money there. Worked there for 6 7 months, and did actually really well, probably the best I'd ever done up to that point. And so didn't even know what to do with the money I was making because I'd never seen that kind of money before, and so was really excited, and kind of cemented my desire to want to continue to be a roofer. And so then we ended up going out to the office. Kind of said, "Hey, we're going to Denver," and it was like within a week everyone was gone, and they're like, "Why don't you shut down the office?" So I was left there alone to kind of do the collections and button up loose ends and all that, and then I had to clean out the office and do all that jazz.
Wow.
We left, and I took my family. We ended up back in Michigan for about 3 4 5 days just to say hi to family on our way out to Denver. And I got out there and honestly just didn't enjoy being out there. And so I flew down to Texas and took my a course to become an adjuster, and was going to maybe have that as another tool in the bag, and didn't end up doing anything with that. So because I didn't realize that you had to have your license in your state of residence. So I was like, well, I'm going to quit on that. So I jumped from that right into we needed to kind of stabilize. We had our second kid on the way at that time, and so I got a job as a inside salesperson at a local supply house, selling roofing to guys like me, and did that for a couple of years. And my brother calls me up one day. He had owned his own roofing company, and He said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm at work." He says, "Well, quit your job." I'm like, I just started laughing. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Come on, man, let's go. You need to get out and do this again." And I'm like, you know what? He's probably right. So I put my 2 week notice in and jump right back out into knocking doors again and creating business, and that did that for about 3 years, and then that's when the idea of Sharp started spawning.
Okay. That's amazing that it was someone else that uh, uh, some someone else, your brother saw something in you, right? Either he saw that you weren't like, this is not where you should be, Ryan. Like, this is not like you have a gift or a talent for something else. How does that it, what was it that he saw? Like, were you unhappy in that role? Were you just content and he saw more in you? What was the like? Have you ever had that conversation with him?
No, we had never. I mean, my brother and I are fairly close. I think the older we get and the more kids we have, it's hard to stay connected.
Yeah,
But at that time, yeah, we were young guys with young families, and he and I get along super well, and kind of people mistake us for twins and all that. So I think he was just like, you know what, I want to grow my business. I would love to do it with my brother. Come on, dude, let's go. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
it's great.
And so that led to Sharp, right?
Yeah.
What's the what year did Sharp start? How did what were some of those early days, and how's it progressed?
Yeah, so when I jumped out with my brother for the next 3 years, we had traveled a little more locally. It wasn't like New York, Denver. It was Midwest. So we were in Indy and east side of the state of Michigan and all that. And so I was still away from my family, 3, 4 days out of the week, maybe five. And we kept having kids. So I've got 6 kids today, and I knew like I want to be a dad. I got to stay close to home. I don't want to be away from them for these amount of time, for extended periods of time like this. So, um, my wife had kind of said, "Hey, you should start your own business." And I'm like, after the first failed one in 07, 08, I'm like, I am not interested in doing that again. But she kept pushing me, and some events transpired that it was like, okay, maybe I could do this again. And so in 2016, I had a business partner, and we March 5th of 16 jumped out with 2 laptops, 2 grand each, and some rusty pickup trucks, and started Sharp Construction. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And and in that transition, like, how was it transitioning? I think a lot of I'm just thinking of a lot of people in the industry that do, they chase storms, right? They go where the storm work is. What were some of those early thoughts of how are you going to do this at home in an area? I mean, where you're at in Michigan is not known as like a big storm restoration market, right? How was what were you thinking? Like, your business model had to change a little bit. How were those early days in that regard?
So we had a recent wind event when I
Nice.
started. So wind is obviously a little tougher to sell than hail, but um, we knew that part of it. And I had been having conversations with local roofers with my time as an inside salesperson, and I was like, man, there is like nobody that's doing this, doing storm restoration work in West Michigan, nor are they interested, because I was trying to say like, hey, I'll teach you what I know. And they're like, you guys, no, I'm not interested. And I'm like, that's so crazy. So we knew how to knock doors, and we knew that if we did find someone that had wind or hail damage, we could help them. So we kind of started from that premise, with that stormer mindset. And but with the idea that we wanted to build a solid brand in our community
Hmm.
that eventually became more heavily retail than it was storm restoration, and that kept guys close to home, and we felt like we could attract more talent versus the guys that have somewhat of that nomadic mindset, where they're fine, more single guys and
Yeah.
without families that can just get out there and run all over the world, and they're having a blast. We needed a little more stability, so we felt like we could attract that. So
Yeah. So I've had this conversation with John Cenac, John the Roof Pro, about, like, if you are a retail roofing company that knows how to do storm restoration work efficiently and effectively, that's like you have such an advantage in the marketplace. So when that wind comes through there off of Lake Michigan, right? Like you
Yep.
know how to how to help the homeowners in the best way possible. You know how to supplement. You know how to help someone with their claim. You know all of those things where what you were saying, some of those local guys. I wonder if they, that made me think of like, I wonder if, because roofers have a bad rap, right? Like, contractors in general have a bad rap, roofers have a bad rap. But then with now that made me think, well, man, maybe within the roofing industry, even like the storm guys are maybe they're looked at even lower or something. And so those retail guys are, that have been in business where you were, they were like, oh no, I don't want to be like those guys. I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah, no, I think definitely amongst the roofing community, I've got a good friend. We're literally twins. We're both GAF Master Elites. He's 20 minutes north of me. We share similar values. He's got no interest in storm work, and I have an interest in it, while I'm
yes.
trying to develop my retail brand. So it's funny that you can, he's like, you guys can have all that, just stay out of my yard, right? And I'm like, that is so crazy. Like, and he's successful, and so I think
Yeah.
there's room for everybody, in the market if you're going to do my big thing is like do the right thing, you know.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of retail, of developing a retail wing or arm to your business is it requires you to be connected with that community differently.
Mm,
So um, I jumped on and became a member of the HBA. We became Chamber of Commerce members. I sit on the board now for our local home builders association. We're giving back to our local community in ways that, when I was a storm chaser, it wasn't even on my radar. It was just hit the neighborhoods, hit them hard. We've only got a certain amount of time to help as many people as we can. So let's go hard. It wasn't, well, in 3 years from now, I want to be the mayor. It wasn't anything like that. It was
yeah.
just you had a short amount of time, go hit it, and then you're off to the next one. So I think there's
So what are what are some of the things that you'd mentioned, like joining the associations? Expand on that a little more of becoming part of the community more.
so I think it starts one at home. So you've got to have a good home life that requires you to be a good husband, a good dad, and all that. So we drill that pretty heavily here at Sharp. Then it's like, okay, once that's good, now you're a force for good as a family. What happens then? We take that outside our doors. Where do we start there? We start in our local communities. We're good neighbors. We take care of our property. We do the right thing. We don't take people's stuff. Like all those like
Yeah.
transcendent principles. Then that continues into like, okay, how about my city? Like, what can I do for my city? Can I show up at a parade, or can I join a board somewhere? Can I impact? You know, um, we're doing things right now with permitting in our local city, and trying to work with builders and building inspectors to create some harmony there and try to find places where we can, accelerate, because it seems like some of those stages during permitting can stall you out, right? And I'm not even a builder, I'm a roofer, but I
Yeah.
participate with other building, contractors and plumbers and electricians to try to make the industry as a whole a better place. And we do that locally, and then that continues to extend hopefully to the state level. So I've been in Lansing with my local representative doing a day in the life and watching what they do and trying to figure out like what little part can I play to either propel their message or get more people involved. So I think that's probably just a byproduct of continuing to grow your influence zone and meet more
Yeah.
people. So yeah.
I love that. And it's I love that how you brought it back to home first though. Like hey, let's make sure that we're taking care of home first. And then we're moving out into our community, and then we're moving out further, and we're moving out further. Um, and with that, like it just seems like that's what um, you're not just it's there's no self again it's selflessness maybe, right? Like you as you continue to move out into the community, and you guys are it's a lot of kind of smaller towns. What, Grand Rapids is probably the biggest place close to you, what, maybe 200,000 people. So I could imagine that you see people at the grocery store every now and then, right?
Sure.
Like you
Yeah.
bump into them at your kid's soccer game or t-ball game or something, right? Like how how do you think about that in being part of the community? Like, do you think that, or let me just put it this way, do you think that being in a small, in a lower population market forces you to be more conscious of that?
Um, for not for me, for some perhaps, but for me, as a Christian, I'm kind of called to this life of service,
Yeah.
and loving my neighbor as myself, giving back, not being selfish, all those good qualities that I feel like the scripture calls me to. So I embrace that first. That's my motivator, is like, I know this life is short. I think there's a next life after it that's a lot longer than this one. And if the Bible's true, then what I'm doing today impacts that next life. Then that's where for me is like, that's motivating. And you just love people, man. There's a lot of really cool people out in the world, and when you get to go out there and help them by putting a new lid on their house, I mean, that's a great moment. But really, to get inside their home, I've had some just amazing conversations with people at the table, and we become friends. We've done dinner together. I just had dinner with a client from 5, 6 years ago. My wife and I, we double dated the other night, and so to have, to be able to share the love that was given to me to somebody else through business, I think is it's just a different way to do it, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's what, when we met, like in a lot of the conversations we had, I'm like, this, you definitely have fun with what you do. You could just tell, like, I could just feel that in you, as that, and one of the most consistent things from all of the contractors that I've spoken to on this podcast is taking care of the customer, like beyond everything else. The it really seems like the contractors that are the most successful and have the most longevity in the business are the ones that take care of the customer first, their team first. How do you carry that same mentality into your team now?
Sure. So, my dad growing up, like I said, he was my pastor. So, there was a verse that he kind of pushed onto us early on, and it was in Proverbs 22. It says, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches." Right. So it's like, I didn't understand that at first. I just knew, like, I'm a Spencer, and I should hold that with some value and regard, and try not to screw it up. Right. But in business, when you're a for-profit business, that can get reversed if you're not careful, and you start looking at P&Ls and dollars and cents and going like, I want to make money, or you set some goal out there that's money driven. And what I've come to realize is, like, man, when we focused on our Google reviews, which meant we actually had to do a good job, all of a sudden the next person chose us because of that, right?
Yeah.
And when when we highlight, for instance, I'll give you a really, in the last week, we started doing a thing called Eyes Up. So Eyes Up is Sharp's way of communicating to the community that our eyes are up to see roofs that need done. Our eyes are up on the Lord, because he calls us to ethics and to a right way of conducting our business. And our eyes are up to see the real needs in our community and try to go out and meet them. So we promote that within our business here amongst our employees. And each one of our employees has a story where they have given back. And so we're highlighting one a month where an employee is recognized for keeping his eyes up and meeting somebody's needs, right? Um, we had someone, we were competing with another roofing contractor for $100,000 project, and they picked Sharp because of the eyes up moment of
Mm.
one of our sales reps. And it was just like further confirmation that when you do the right thing, the money will follow. But if you're doing it just for the money, like my dad says, if you keep your reputation first, you'll always have it to make money. But if you go for making money and you need your reputation, you can't use that money to buy it. And so you got to keep the main thing, and the money will follow. It might be a slower train, but it will be a sure train. It'll be something that, to your point, will have longevity and be sustainable. So
Yeah, it's like you can't turn that off,
yeah,
right? You can't turn off your reputation,
yeah,
good or bad.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
exactly.
with any kind of marketing dollars, it's very, very challenging. I love that eyes up, and that was why someone chose you. People want to buy from people with similar values, they or have something in common with, or feel that they are trustworthy, right? what are what was the inception of that? How did this come about, the eyes up?
Man, that's a good question. It's been recent. So in the last, I think we've done three of them. So it would have been in the last 3 months. I don't know. I came up with Eyes Up. I don't know what the context was, so I
Yeah,
apologize that I don't have more to
that's
go on
all right.
that. But yeah, it was a moment. So it
And it
worked out
was like,
really
this
well.
is
So
yeah, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna start spotlighting this, and I
yeah,
think that's a big part of it. Is just you can put a spotlight on the things that you're doing well, right? And I think a lot of times, I guess sometimes people may feel, or business owners may feel, that is, there's a lack of humility in doing that, right? Maybe that they're boisterous, or something like that. They don't want to come across as using that as more for marketing than in a sincere way.
right.
Have you had any thoughts about that? Like, hey, we're just going to do this in this way, and we're, it's our heart. So we hope that people see that it's our heart, or we're going to do some conscious things to make sure that people don't understand that we're not doing this for the money.
So one of the things that helps me overcome that is by always promoting someone else.
Mm,
So by talking great about the guy three doors down the hall here, that's easy for me to do because I'm proud of what he is. Now he might have to battle that when I put his name out there and say that he's awesome. He might have to overcome that. But for me, I'm like, I know the real guy. I know this poured out of him just naturally.
yeah.
It's who he is. So I don't have any problem with that as long as I'm talking about someone else. I don't necessarily like to self promote. That's why I didn't name it Spencer Roofing. It's Sharp Roofing because I kind of wanted to fade off in the background and have our team be recognized for what we do, not an individual. So yeah.
But that's a big that you know in early in business, that's a big mindset to have, right? Hey, I'm going to not name my company Spencer Roofing. I'm going to name it Sharp Roofing because I want to highlight the team. Did you know that then, or was it then it was like, I just don't want to highlight myself?
I knew that you don't build a business flying solo, and
Yeah.
so and I wanted our team to be highlighted in the community. I wanted anytime you saw someone with a sharp shirt, I wanted you to think, oh, they're probably the owner, And actually, that's one thing that Job Nimbus we were impressed with when we were at the crew event this last week was that you could guess that everyone was the CEO. I mean, when you were there was such a buy-in and such a like harmony. And I thought, man, I would love to have that. And when we started Sharp, I mean, that's always been my vision was to have a real cohesive team that works together and looks out for each other, impacts the community, and finds success through those, avenues. So
Yeah. Have you had any challenges in building the team, or along the way, where there's been some struggle in with certain people maybe not fitting in, kind of being infectious in a negative way to the culture that you've had to get rid of?
So last year we lost three sales reps in sometime between like July and September. 3 or 4 months prior than that, in our leadership meetings, those individuals' names were brought up, that it wasn't a good fit and I should make a move to, move on. And I was like, oh no, like you don't know them like I know them. I think there's a chance, it could work out. And then because I didn't make the move when my leadership team saw that, I suffered for that. So and Sharp suffered for that. We lost a $3 million contract to somebody starting their own business. Once they found out they had it, they started their own business and signed a contract away from us. And things that probably could have been avoided had I been more decisive. I will say any of my people problems are my problem. So it hasn't. It's because I'm indecisive when it comes to people. I always want to see the best in them or think that there's better that can be pulled out. What I fail to realize a lot of times is the impact it has on the superstars that actually are creating the culture. And you can have a bucket full of great water, but you pour a little bit of poison in there, and all of a sudden, it's hard to separate that. And so we've been in kind of a rebuild since September. We've got a solid team now of just good, positive guys that embrace, one of our core values is adaptable. And so they've adapted well to like technology changes, shifts in the way we conduct business. We're on the EOS train trying to do some self implementation with that, and that can be challenging. Is when you not measuring anything, and all of a sudden you start trying to measure, it can feel like micromanagement and all that. So we're navigating all those waters. We got a good team right now that's kind of embracing that instead of being resistant to it. So
That's awesome.
maybe that's a long answer.
Along the way now, you've had some of those challenges we all do in business. You're going to, right? But I love it. They're all just lessons, right?
Yep.
So, and I do believe as companies grow, you the hiring of the people is what the business is, right? Like you have whatever service, but the people is what makes it run. And as business owners, we have to get really good at finding those talented people. What lessons do you feel you've learned in decisions that you can make on the hiring side now? Like, okay, I saw how this went with these team members and it didn't go well. Do you see any red flags, or have you made any adjustments now to through your hiring process that you've said, okay, now I'm going to make sure to look for this, or I'm going to make sure to verify this?
We're better than we were. I still think when I hear about some of the hiring practices and questions people ask, I'm like, oh man, that's really good. Like,
It's a good one, right? Yeah.
yeah, you worked for me, and you could handle that. But what I will say is, it used to be check their pulse. Did they smile at least once? All right, you're in, and would figure out from there. Today, we run them through three different interview in the process. There's three different interviews that take place with three different positions within the company. So you meet with me, and then you'll meet with our leadership team. Then you'll do a ride along with a sales rep, and then we kind of collectively say, hey, do we feel this person would be a good fit in the organization, embody our core values, and find success here? And then we make that decision. It's not foolproof, but it's better than what it was, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing too is like you can't want for somebody what they don't want for themselves. And so, I've had some guys where I'm like, man, dude, you have all of the stuff that you can't like go out and make in a person. Like you have it internally, and you just don't want it. And so that's really hard, because you're trying to like stoke a fire that there's no wood there. So
Yeah, it's amazing how like when, especially, when you've been, in door-to-door sales or you've been in roofing sales, and you're like, oh my goodness, like this person right
I
here, like
know.
they and
Yeah.
and they're they're like a server at a local, restaurant or something. And you're like, you could really make a, but it's just
It's
not
not,
in it, right?
yeah.
Or it's not in them now, right? There may be a time, or maybe they have to have some lessons along their life, right? That start to stoke that fire, right?
Well, and I think too,
um,
when you're stoked, like it's your business, even before it was my business, like I loved my job, right, as a roofing salesperson. And some
yeah,
days I wish I was back there, in some respects when difficult times come and all that, because it was just fun. I was having a blast making money and meeting new people, and I think, yeah, when you see all that in someone, it's really hard. You think that your passion can translate to them, and that they're motivated by the same things that you're motivated by, and that's not always the case. And so
yeah,
what the challenge is for me is to try to figure out, like, what does this guy, what button, when I push it, he goes off like a rocket, and goes out and crushes it. What is it? Is it money? Is it time with his family? Is it, a trophy, an award? Is it acknowledgement, social media? Like, what is it that gets this guy firing? And then how can I just slam that button down with a hammer,
yeah.
and so that's been the challenge for us right now, is like trying to have all the tools in place that all of those buttons get hit, so everybody gets what they need to stay motivated. And
Yeah, you have to know what motivates them, because it's not what motivates you.
yeah.
It's everyone has so many such different motivation. Coming from the sales side of things, salespeople are not um, known to be the most organized. I don't know if you were the most organized when you were a salesperson, on the sales side, but when you move into a business owner and into a more operational role, boy, you gotta, what were some of the biggest challenges you had in that transition?
So in 2016, we started with Excel documents and using just the file management on your laptop or desktop computer. With owners, you unfortunately you get away with murder sometimes, and so that worked for about a year and a half, and then we started hiring our first salespeople, and then we hired our first receptionist, office manager. She's the one that quickly realized, like, we need something that all of us use together to keep this train moving. And so she's the one that brought the CRM to
Mhm.
Sharp. Originally, we interviewed Job Nimbus and I think Builder Trend and some others, and I think, man, Job Nimbus was like 2.5 months old or something. They weren't that old, so it was a pretty rudimentary product at that time, but it worked well for us, and we saw the future in it. So that was where the start to creating like a good process. That was the first initial step. So then Job Nimbus says, "Hey, we want you to come down to Orlando and be part of our summit." So I think that was 2018. Went down to Job Nimbus, got introduced at that time to Sales Pro, or what was Leap back then. Like, wow, this is amazing. So we bought into Leap. That created more continuity in our quoting. So you could have three guys come quote the job, and it's going to look almost identical, maybe within a couple percentage points off, depending on what they put in the quote. And then Hover came around, and it was like, oh, and then Hover now loves on Leap, and so we could automate our quotes, and which created more speed and continuity. And then all of a sudden, Job Nimbus talks to those apps, and you start realizing, like, wow, there's some steps here that we don't have to make anymore that we had to make in those first
Mhm.
days, because technology has allowed us to automate those redundant steps. So today is, I mean, I've never been more excited about the tech stack and what it's able to do than I am today. I mean, it's going to be amazing. So
Yeah, so you've used technology to build that foundation of organization and efficiencies in your business, is what it sounds like.
and continue to do so. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
That I
What have
think
you?
is the other step too, is like you have to, once you have something, like you have to continue to ask the questions, is this the best thing for my business? And what we had a sales manager come in. He actually was only in the position we brought him from the field into sales management. He did it for maybe 5 months, and I could just tell the guy was miserable. And so I walked in his office. I said, "Hey, you like this job?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." I was like, "Come on, man. Like, you don't like this job. I could tell you're floundering." He's like, "Yeah, I wish I was back out in the field." I'm like, "All right, we'll go do that." But in that time, he took another like fresh look at Sharp's tech stack. We eliminated one, brought in another, saved some money, and had a better, more efficient program. So I think when you start introducing tech, you can also get static in that, and you have to remind yourself that, hey, every year and a half, I need to get a refresh, go travel somewhere, go to a tech conference, and get the latest and greatest information. So we've
Yeah,
saved
it's a
probably a whole
continuous iteration, right? It just
yeah,
continues to iterate. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything like if you just stop in business and go, okay, we're good enough. Like, boy, you're going downhill. Like it's not gonna work out well for you. So those continuous, always trying to find the better way, the more efficient way, whether it's in your tech stack or your hiring or whatever it is, right? It's just the constant iteration of things. Let's talk a little bit about how you became known in your market. How did you market to the community? How did Sharp become, the best known roofer in your area?
yeah. Well, nobody knew me. I didn't have a pedigree here. I wasn't like a foundational member of the community. I was nobody. And so I started knocking doors. That was day one. Got my first job. Well, got my first contract signed. We hadn't put the roof on yet, but they referred us to one of their friends, and we actually put his roof on before theirs. So my first job was a referral, which is hilarious. So that was kind of the start, and then then that became referrals. Oh, go see my mom. I'll go see my friend, and we kept knocking doors around that. And so the first year we did 55 roofs between my business partner and I, about $650,000. We weren't involved in any of the community things. Just nose down, grind it out, go get jobs. Second year, we started doing some hiring. That's, I think, when we joined the HBA right around that time. Started attending events, shaking hands, meeting people. And then it was, hey, you should be on the board. And then we doubled our business that next year, just by pushing it out there. You put some stickers on your truck and you start thinking about that kind of thing. And so I don't think it's any one moment when it just boom, it becomes this brand. We've actually rebranded 3 times, I think, in the last 8 years, trying to figure out who the heck we are. But over time, if that's like, if you have an end goal in mind of like, I want continuity and how people see, they shouldn't see 10 shades of blue and, 14 different iterations of our logo, like pick one, run with it, and make, be able to, maybe you make a slight variation in some stuff. Like we went from Sharp Construction to Sharp Real Estate and Construction because we thought maybe that could be another arm to our business. That ended up not being something we wanted to pursue. So then that changed again to back to Sharp Construction. Then we're like, well, we really like roofing and wish more people knew because they weren't connecting the dots with the roofing. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to change to Sharp Roofing. So in the last 8 years, we've done 3 different name changes, and so I mean that stuff can be tough. But I think overall, that Sharp name hasn't changed in look and whatever. So people are starting to connect that with Holland, with West Michigan. We see you guys everywhere. I hear that all the time, and so I think as long as you have some continuity there, it's a good start.
And time. This is what everyone wants, the magic pill, right? Like, how do I just go to 10 million this year? Well, that's a really tough thing to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in a retail market where you have to, people have to know you. One of the things you mentioned in kind of when you were telling your story was about your training in just, hey, that's a GAF roof, that's an OC roof, there's your training. How have you, with that being your training or being your first training in the industry, how do you look at training in your company?
So initially it was get in here, here's your iPad, and we've loaded all your apps. Go. I used to say, go out and make waves, and then I'll teach you to surf. Right? Was my idea. Is like
Okay.
at the beginning stages, go knock a door like I did, get that first job because then your training will stick. Now, there might be some truth to that, but sending a guy out in the jungle with a buck knife and hoping he survives, I mean, that's just not a real sustainable way to approach training. It can work if the guy's motivated, but it's not. You can also make some mistakes that could be very public and that could damage your reputation. So today
Mm.
we link them up with link them up with one of our trainers, and they will, depending on where they're coming from. So I have a guy that's starting Monday that's got some experience in the industry. So he knows roofing, he knows this and that. So he's not going to need that like ground up. Here's what a shingle looks like, So he'll be probably a 2 week, 2 week ride along and just getting acquainted with our apps. How do they work? How do they talk to each other? What are the steps I have to take to get my job from start to finish? Where do I come in and where does somebody else take over? Those kind of things, those kind of internals. A guy that we've had 3 guys start at one time that didn't know anything. And so that was a 2 or 3 month, someone not necessarily completely in your hip pocket, but they're right alongside you. I mean, if you're going to an appointment, they're going with you. If you're writing an estimate, they might push you to write it until you fail, and then they'll help you figure out like, hey, man, add this or do that. But it's a much cleaner. We get a faster turnaround time too. So it used to be we would tell guys, hey, 2 or 3 months before you get your first job. Now we're seeing it in 2 weeks.
Mm.
So when you have someone connected with you that's helping you connect the dots and plug the holes faster, you're seeing a result from that faster, which is better for Sharp as a whole and better for the guy. So he's not getting frustrated that he hasn't seen anything. He's getting something right away. So that's been a much better introduction to the Sharp experience.
Yeah, definitely. How have you structured the flow? Right? You'd mentioned, hey, they have to learn the flow, who does what, where the handoff is. How have you structured that flow? Who's responsible for what all the way through the build?
So we sat down with, one, when you get into Job Nimbus, which we're been a partner with for a while, that's kind of what they require you to do in order for the program to work. Is you have to sit down and go like, okay, phone rings, next step. Who's doing that? What's the next step? And then that can change over time, because now we have the automation conversation. It's like, who does that step? Well, actually, nobody does that step. It does it on its own. So you have to reevaluate and reiterate what your flow is, because sometimes the tech can take over for that. But I think when you sit down and you can talk yourself through what a perfect roof looks like, or a perfect project looks like, then you can start to map out like, this is where we're going to bottleneck currently. How can we solve for that? Oh, we're really good here. How do we continue to capitalize that or expand that to where every guy is able to get that same result? And I think that comes by, one, not thinking that I have all the answers, because I absolutely do not, but leaning into your team to kind of get their viewpoints. I've even gone outside of our team to say, hey, what would you think of this, without knowing anything about what I do? And I just told you this. What do you think? And I've gotten some good feedback from questions like that. So
Definitely, you have to. It's a ever evolving process, I'm sure, but with the intentionality of, hey, let's draw out the steps, like let's right now who's responsible for each of them, and just the basic. Just a lot of times we don't even do that, right? Especially in the beginning, it's like,
free for all.
Let's go. We got to go. We need money. We need to pay our bills.
Yep.
How has it, where were the different stages? Because you guys are in the high seven figures now. Where were those some of those milestones along the way where the business had a like this was a big changing moment when we got to this level or this many team members or something like that?
Knowing that I wanted there to be consistency, caused me to think about like technology because I knew that would be a big piece to it. I think when we hired our first, we didn't hire our first rep. I think we hired our first five. We hired all of our friends, and we handed iPads out to everyone and, made some investment there. And then we would have like in my living room, pull your iPad out, and we would all train together. That was a probably the big turning point for Sharp was like, okay, this is becoming legit. We're all doing the same thing to give this client the same experience. Now, you might not like, I described it like this. You go to McDonald's, I've had some really great people take my order, and I've had some people that hated my guts just because they didn't want to be at work that day taking my order. And yet I still stayed at McDonald's and I ordered from both of them because I knew behind them was a process that produced a product that tasted the way I wanted it to taste. So the Big Mac came to me and it tasted the same way that the Big Mac did with the guy that liked me, So there can be personality shifts, but the product that we give to a client should be relatively the same. I mean, they should like the taste of what we're delivering.
Yeah.
And so that's what technology allowed us to do is like, hey, you might not like, Jerry, but, or Ryan, but you like Jerry, but it doesn't matter who you sign with because what you're going to get is 5 stars, So technology definitely allowed us to do that. I think from hopefully, and this is not meant to come across prideful, but hopefully I'm modeling to my team the type of environment we want to create internally, the type of environment we want the community to, be a part of, and modeling that from the top down, being able to articulate that. But then to say, like, hey, you don't have to know all this stuff. We're actually going to continue automating to where you can focus on that relationship and not have to worry about all of these back end little steps and button clicks and whatever else. So, and that continues every day to get better, which is exciting. So,
Yeah, that is exciting.
you know.
What do you think the greatest insight is that you could share with our audience about how to find success in their roofing businesses?
I think success is different for everyone. I think when you talk to people who sell, shingles to me, their idea of my success is to sell more shingles, right? If I'm talking to tech company or whatever, maybe their idea of my success is that I have more users, because that drives their success. I think you've got to take a look at what I battled this in the last year, where I'm like, okay, what does success look like for Ryan? Am I growing for the sake of growth? Do I have the right motivations? And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I actually did have the right motivation, but I was just tired, right? Maybe some bad stuff was happening in the moment, and I'm like, oh, all of a sudden a private equity firm sends you an email, and the time when you're at your low point, you're like, oh heck yeah, I'd sell this thing for 50 cents. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, I love this job, and you ride that roller coaster of ups and downs. Uh, you know, I think you've got to look internally and say, hey, what really motivates me to get up out of bed every day and attack this business with ferocity. And if it was that way at one point and I've lost that, why? Is it something temporary, or is there something fundamentally wrong? Maybe I should only be a 5 million or 6 million or 2 million or 20 million or whatever company, and this is my sweet spot. And because I've had money in ways that I haven't had in the last 5 years, and I bought some stupid stuff, which some of my financial advisors said I would do, and I did. You're right. And you realize quickly it's like I could buy a ton of things that really make no significant impact on my quality of life. And so when I look at that now, it's like, okay, well, I know I don't need to buy that anymore, but does that mean I shouldn't grow? Not necessarily. Maybe it's just a challenge to my own internal motivations. And when I turn my gaze back to impacting the community, loving on people, creating a better environment for my employees to be able to find success for themselves and their families, all of a sudden my spark came back, to want to go to that next level. How do we get there? And it was less about money and buying things and more about like um, relationships. So my grandfather, I'll probably end with this, but my grandfather was asked by my brother when he was dying of cancer. My brother said, "Hey, what's a piece of advice you could give a young guy that's at the beginning stages of his life, you having already lived yours and on your way out?" And he said, and that my grandfather was very successful in business, had been up and down. And he said, relationships are the only thing that matter. And so I think when we keep that in check, we can grow to whatever size or shrink to whatever size, and we can still have, you know, a good feeling about life. So,
That's awesome. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Thank you for tuning into the Roofing Success Podcast. For more valuable content, visit roofingsuccesspodcast.com. While there, check out our sponsors for exclusive offers, shop for merchandise, and sign up for our newsletter for industry updates and tips. Also, join the Roofing Success Facebook group to connect with other professionals and stay updated on the latest trends. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Your support helps us continue to bring you top industry insights. The website link is in the description. Thanks for listening.